we're taking a look at making different kinds of weapons. And I don't have it actually set to do it, but by the end of class today, what I'd like you guys to do is be able to press different numbers, like 1, 2, 3, and 4 to select different kinds of weapons. And so right now I have like this really slow weapon that just fires a little bullet out, and it takes a little while before it can fire again. I don't have it selectable, but what I want you guys to build by the end of the class, or at least shortly after, is I could press like the 2 key, and all of a sudden it would have a different gun. So when I press space, it would behave differently. But I'll just demonstrate the variety of types of things that we're going to create. So here's the code for choosing what kind of gun I'm going to have. You just saw the basic gun that fires a nice, boring little bullet every once in a while. So I can make instead a new machine gun. And if I run that, I'm just hard coding it, but eventually it'll make it. So now, whoa, so many bullets coming out. Wow, look at all the bullets. So, just changing one line of code made that happen. And then I think we'll get crazy. I'm not sure what it's called. I think it's the Death Blossom. Shout out to The Last Starfighter, 1980s movie. I believe it was the first use of CGI in a major motion picture. And it was terrible, but awesome at the same time. So this gun is just like, blah, just shoots stuff all over the place and go crazy. And you can simulate the Doppler effect and all sorts of fun things with that and have some fun. So that's some of the things we're going to do today. And then you guys can take what we do here and just add on to it and make all sorts of different kinds of guns. And I think it'll be a really useful thing. So I'm just going to show you what my ship class looks like. I'm not going to tell you all the details about it just yet, but I'll show you some of the details. So first of all, our ship's going to get a new instance variable. Not everything needs this instance variable, so I'm not going to put it into GameObject. But our ship needs to have a kind of gun. I'm just going to call it my gun, and it's going to be of type gun. So that implies we're going to make a gun class. And then in the setup, that's where you're going to choose what kind of gun you have. And notice that I've already typed in Death Blossom, I've typed in basic gun, I've typed in machine gun. That implies that there's a category here. Like mammal is a category to bears and tigers and whales and all sorts of things, right? So gun is actually going to be one of those category classes, an abstract class that is going to represent all sorts of common code between all the different kinds of guns. And we'll make separate classes that are the actual distinct guns that we're going to make. Later on, you're going to put this in some kind of if statement where you're going to say, if you press 1, my gun equals new Death Blossom. If you press 2, my gun equals new basic gun, that kind of thing. But right now, we're just going to go with this. So that's great. And then in our act function, instead of just adding bullets directly to the engine, now we're going to just tell our gun to shoot. So our guns are going to have the shoot function. And how it shoots is going to depend on what kind of gun you have built in the my gun variable. So if my gun is a Death Blossom, its shoot function will be different than the basic gun. So that's what that's going to look like. And then there's going to be this thing called mygun.update, but we're not going to call it update, we're going to call it recharge. That's from last block. My other block, they've gone a little bit further. And I used update, but I think it doesn't make sense. Recharge makes a lot more sense as a verb to describe what this function does. And it's going to be responsible for updating the cooldown of the gun. So you can kind of change how long it takes between shots. But we do have to tell the gun to sort of refill that whatever cooldown kind of variable that we're going to keep track of to do that. So that's really all that changes in the ship class. And that'll work for any kind of gun that we create. So that's the importance of what we're going to do. This is the reason we're going to do it this way. You could just have if space key and then check, some variable to see if it's this or that variable and have a bunch of different shooting. But this is really elegant, this design. And that's an important thing to think about as you become a more and more experienced programmer is how do you make a program that is really like clear and simple and has the least amount of code going on, right? This code, the way we have it, will handle any kind of gun that we ever make. And that's great. Then all the changes we make are just going to be adding new tabs, adding new kinds of guns, and all that kind of stuff. So this is why we're going to this effort. Does that make sense, folks? You guys on board? What's going on here? Yeah? Maybe? Any questions so far? No? Okay, well, pardon me. I'm going to go now to the gun class. We're going to delete the whole thing. I don't know where it is. This is an annoying feature of processing. I'm hoping they fix it soon. When you have too many tabs, you just can't see the names on the tabs. So it's like you just click, click, click. So I'm going to get rid of all the code that's in here. I won't get rid of this stuff, but that's fine. So yeah, we're going to make a new class called gun. So I'm going to make it an abstract class. In other words, we're never going to have a thing that is a gun. We're never going to say gun equals new gun. Gun is going to be a category. And we'll have a bunch of guns that extend gun. We'll have machine gun that extends gun. Notice something else that's special. We're not extending game object. This is the first time we have not extended game object for a class. And that's because guns aren't going to have X and Y coordinates. They're not going to have hit points. They're not going to have widths and heights. They are completely independent from all that stuff. We don't really need that kind of stuff. We already have a ship that represents that. So we don't need to have all the information. And guess what? Now ship is actually kind of a fancier object now. It's an object that has an object. It's an object that manages an object. It's like its own little engine built into the greater engine. And we can make this more and more sophisticated later on. We can add other types of things it can have. So anyways, this is going to be our class gun. I apologize. I'm not putting the closed brace. I'm leaving some random code I have at the bottom. So there is a closed brace there if you're following along with the typing. So you might want to add that in. So for abstract class gun, what we're going to do is it's really just going to manage when to shoot and how to shoot. And it also has to recharge this cooldown concept. So we're going to have two variables. I'm going to call it cooldown and threshold. Excuse me, I really regret not drinking more water at lunchtime. So here's the difference between cooldown and threshold. You've all probably played a game with some kind of cooldown thing, right? Like in League of Legends, the abilities have cooldowns, right? Like you click on the I don't even know League of Legends, so it's embarrassing for me even to speak about it. But you click on the icon to do the thing, and then there's like a little like doo-doo-doo-doo timer that goes, and eventually it goes all the way around, and then you can click it again. But until that timer finishes, you can't use that ability, right? So there's a built-in time where that ability isn't usable. But once it fills up, you can use it at any time. Is this familiar to people? Is this sound? Yeah? No? Yeah? Well, we're not going to visualize it yet, but we could turn it into a bar for sure. So that's something that we'll do later on with some sort of user interface lessons where we kind of look at how we can turn these variables into visuals. And I have that kind of built in just to show you, because it might be interesting for you to see it in action. So the idea is that cooldown is going to represent how much longer before we can shoot again. And threshold will be like the point at which we need to get to in order to reshoot. So if I could illustrate that, imagine, I'm going to use ASCII here. This is going to be great. Here is a bar. I feel like there's a terrible joke involved in here somewhere. This is where I need the insert key. Mac has failed me. Here we go. Imagine this as like as a bar. And when this bar fills up, then you can shoot. And every time you shoot, the bar suddenly goes down to 0 again. And then slowly it kind of refills, and then it gets up, and okay, you can shoot again. This is the concept that we're going to be recreating without the visual yet. So the threshold is how much you have to refill. That's what this threshold represents. If you have a high threshold, then this is going to be longer. But if I have a lower threshold, then maybe this bar is smaller, so it takes less time, to fill up again. Right? So if I have a smaller threshold, then this will, recharge faster because there's less recharging to do. So does it make sense? Like if I had a high threshold gun, would I be shooting more bullets or less bullets per second? If I have a high threshold, I'd be shooting less, right? The higher the threshold, the longer it takes for it to fill, right? Because I have to go all the way to, however long you want to go. So if I had a high threshold, you know, this ASCII thing's not working. I'm doing this for the sake of the YouTube video. I should probably do this on the board, but you know, if I increase the threshold, then you know it'll take longer for you to fill that bar up. Think of that threshold as sort of like how big a bucket is of water, and you can't shoot until you fill up that bucket with water, and there's this constant like flow of water that's flowing into it. So the bigger the bucket, the bigger the threshold, the longer it'll take before you can shoot. So threshold will allow you to control the rate of fire, which is sort of a common term in gaming, right? Or your DPS, damage per second, kind of stuff. Cooldown represents how far along this bar you've recharged. So cooldown's gonna like eventually fill up all the way to the end. When you fire, it'll go down to 0, and then it's gonna be sort of filling up slowly, over time, and we can determine how fast or slow it recharges. So that's the idea behind those two variables. Can I ask for if you guys have any questions about the difference between cooldown and threshold? Is that clear? I kind of think I explained it, but I don't know for sure. If you played video games, you're probably like, I know. But if you haven't played these games, you might not know. So putting it out there. Okay, so going on then. If you guys feel good about that, yeah, does it make sense? Threshold is how long it takes before you can shoot again. Cooldown is how much you've recharged so far. So threshold is how much you have to recharge to before you shoot again. Cooldown is how much recharging you've done. Yeah? Yeah? Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. In this case, the code might actually make more sense than my explanation. I don't know. So we're going to make a gun constructor, but you know what? We're never going to use it. We're not going to use it because this is a category, not an actual gun. But we're going to build some of these things anyways in here. So we'll leave that blank, and we'll actually make a real constructor when we go to make a real gun. But we can talk about the mechanics of how the gun will work. So we already know we need two methods, right? Or sorry, functions. We need two functions. Do you remember what those two functions are? We used them already. We said mygun dot something. Yeah, shoot. So we're going to need a void shoot. And what's the other one? Recharge, yeah. So let's do recharge first of all. Recharge is really easy. It's just a matter of filling the cooldown variable until we get to threshold. So basically, if cooldown is less than threshold, then we increase cooldown. Cooldown equals, I'll just put plus plus if that's okay. We're just adding 1 to cooldown each time. You can say cooldown equals cooldown plus 1 if you prefer. So what's going to happen here if cooldown is less than threshold? Well, it'll add 1 every frame until it gets up to threshold. We're just filling it back up again if we ever empty it. Okay, everyone good with that? So that's recharge. And you know what? We're probably never gonna change that code. We're just gonna use that same recharge function over and over again, and that's just because it's not much more complicated than that. So we'll build in some basic kind of shooting function as well. So when are we allowed to shoot? Something about cooldown. Yeah, if cooldown equals threshold. So if we're at the point where we can shoot, how do we shoot? Well, we already have that actually in ship, right? We already have. Yeah, there we go. But just to finish that comment, if space key, that's already built in, right? We tell the gun to shoot. But the code that's now missing is the engine.add new bullet. So we're going to say engine.add new bullet. Seems like a lot of work to have, basically just, it's like we added just another step, it seems. But this will allow us to control our rate of fire, which is important. And it'll also open up a bunch of new possibilities as well. Excuse me, gosh. Now, if we were to run this, like we couldn't actually make a new gun yet. So that's the category. Now let's actually go make a gun. We'll go make a basic gun. It's a very lame name, so if you have a better name, please use it. I've already coded it up Here's my amazing basic gun. So small. And actually, I think cooldown should equal 0. My apologies. So notice, this is a non-abstract class, right? So we can make an instance of it. We can create it. Basic gun, and notice it extends gun. So that means it's building on top of gun. It gets all the things that gun has. But now we add a constructor that defines the threshold and sets the cooldown at 0 to begin the game. So where's the shoot function? Where's the recharge function? Actually, maybe I should give you guys just a second because I hear furious typing right now. It's very, very finger focused right now. You probably can't think and type too well at the same time. So I'll give you guys a second. Nick, I'll answer your question. Yeah, so every different type of gun is going to be its own class. Exactly. So we'll have a class. You don't have to. You could stack them all in one tab if you want, because they're pretty short, right? This is a pretty small one. So if you wanted to then go down here and be like, here's a class super gun, extends gun. You could just put them all in one tab if you wanted to, just save tab space. I personally like to put them in separate tabs, but because of the processing bug here with the names, I could see why you might not. Harry, thanks for your question. Say again, sorry, gun? Gun equals my gun. Oh, that's all in the ship. I'll come back to the ship in a minute, but basically the ship is, it has a gun variable. In the setup, we actually choose what gun it's going to be. Right now, you only have one choice, but we'll make lots to choose from. So that just starts. The game will start with my gun being a basic gun, and then when you shoot, you just shoot whatever my gun is. This can change during the game, though. It might not always be a basic gun. Later on, we'll put it in a Death Blossom or whatever. And then always mygun.recharge to make sure we fill up the cooldown variable again. So let's go back to basic gun. This is it. This is all our basic gun is. It's a pretty dull thing, but my question to ask you guys that I want you to think about is, well, where is its shoot function? Where is its recharge function? And how can it exist as just like that? Where is all that stuff coming from? Extends. Yeah, extends. So because we extend gun, if I don't go and type, and don't type this because we're not trying to, if I don't go and type void shoot for basic gun, then it gets the shoot function from gun. So basic gun will use this, and it will use this as well. It'll just have those things. So we don't have to redo them. We don't have to reinvent the wheel every time we want to make a new gun. If that's good enough, if that's what we want it to do, then that's good. We can just define this information here. So let me just run this and see if it works. So, I think we forgot something. What did we forget? Yeah, cooldown actually doesn't do anything. I forgot. It's in the gun class. This is my fault. We have to empty the cooldown when we shoot. That's what makes it work. So when we fire, don't forget to put in cooldown equals 0. Because then it's going to take however many frames for it to recharge. And in my game, I have that arc that goes around my spaceship to show you the value of what cooldown is. So if you're wondering what that is, as it charges up, that's the value of cooldown. So I press space, and then I can't do it again until cooldown reaches threshold. So you can see my rate of fire, right? 50 frames a second. 50 frames between when I shoot. It's a little bit faster than one bullet per second. It's pretty slow. I don't think I could actually kill anything. Well, maybe these ones because they stop. But I'm not going to stand here and make you watch that. So that's the story behind making a gun that has a cooldown. Now, I want to show you how we can make a machine gun, right? What's the difference between a machine gun and a basic gun? Well, it just shoots faster. So that means it has a lower threshold. So I think I have a machine gun tab somewhere. Oh yeah, I'm going to get rid of this. And I want to put it to 0. So here's class machine gun. It's basically the same thing, right? But I just redefined my threshold. Threshold is lower. So I'll get 6 shots per second if I'm running at maximum frame rate. So how do I get the machine gun to be my gun? Well, if I go back to ship, I can say my gun is a new machine gun instead. And if I run that, you'll see that I shoot much faster. So we have two different types of guns that behave differently and are, somewhat interesting. So before we go any further, what I'd like you guys to do as a class is to take what you already know about the keyboard input stuff. So going back to this stuff here, remember void key press, void key release? We have various variables that we're keeping track of that will allow us to sort of interact with the keyboard. So what I'd like you guys to do is add in some number keys. Actually, it can be anything. It doesn't matter what you guys want to use. But number keys are the usual ones, right? If you want to use F1, F2, and stuff like that, I guess you could use that instead. But just for now, use number keys. So you could say something like, if key equals 1, then, 1 key equals true, and stuff like that. Like, build all that stuff in for different numbers. I guess you just need 2 numbers right now. And make it so that when you press 1, it makes a basic gun, and you press 2, it makes a machine gun. So that you can kind of change in the middle of the game. Later on, we're going to change it so it's not based on the numbers you press, but like if you collide with a power-up that gives you that gun. But this will just be a good experience to see how it is that you can change the guns on the fly. And that'll, I think, will show you a lot about how this works. So go ahead and get that started, and we're going to call that good for our video. Maybe. All right, stop recording.